Hey folks, tonight we're going to be disassembling the Q5 match steel frame to install the Overwatch Precision Tac trigger that I've got here. This is going to just give you a basic overview of the takedown steps you need to do in order to install the trigger and the new trigger springs that come with it. In a separate video, I'm going to do a full detail strip of this gun down to the last part. So if you're interested in that, I'll post that one soon. With that said, what are you going to need? One is your new trigger. We have the trigger attached to the trigger bar already, as well as the two trigger springs that it comes with. I'm actually cheating a little bit. One of the trigger springs is in one of my other guns. You're going to need a Q5 match steel frame. Gun is clear. You'll also need 3 30-second inch punch, a gunsmithing hammer, nice to have a magnetic dish to hold all the pins and stuff you're going to take out. And you've got a couple options. You can either use a bench block like this or a roll of tape. This is just regular old blue painter's tape. The reason I'm going to be using this for most of the work we're doing tonight is in order to get the slide stop off, you actually have to hammer out the pin that's attached to the left side of the slide lock lever. And when that comes off, a normal size bench block is actually going to sort of catch that and prevent it from coming all the way out for you to disassemble. Alright, so apologies for the mess that you're seeing hanging out on the bench, but we're going to start by removing the slide. Hopefully you already know how to do this by the time you're trying to install a new trigger. So now we've got our lower assembly. First step is going to be to remove the takedown lever. So with the takedown lever rotated all the way up, just pull on it a little bit. You can apply a little bit of force from the opposite side over here, but it'll just start to pop out and you can just remove it, put it off to the side. Next step is going to be to remove the slide stop assembly. So this is a two-piece part. Left side is the slide stop lever that's acted on by the spring, the piece that engages the magazine follower, the part that actually catches on the slide, and then a pin that actually runs through the trigger assembly, which you can actually probably see it a little bit here. Let's cut out on the trigger, and then comes all the way over through to the right side of the frame and interfaces with the right side of the slide stop assembly. This side is just a lever, but it's engaged with this little cross piece here. So we're going to take our roll of tape or your bench block with appropriately sized hole in it, 3 30-second punch. What you're going to do is you're actually going to apply slightly upward force on the right side lever while you do this. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, so my hands are actually going to get in the way. I'm using my pinky finger to do that. And then we'll start hammering a little bit. And boom, out comes the left side of the slide stop. The right side is going to sort of be slightly captive in the frame, but if you rotate it out and down a little bit, out it'll come. You'll see there's a little nub right here that's actually going to hang inside the frame, which is why it's a little bit more difficult to remove. Alright, so that's the hard part. I have run across a couple Walthers here and there where that pin does not want to come out no matter how hard you wail on it. I have not had that happen with the steel frame, but it happened on one of my polymer PPQs. So now we got 2 pins left. All right. One is here, it was covered up by the slide stop. The other one is back here. This one's holding in this back one's holding in the sear housing. The front one is holding in the locking block. So we'll start there. These pins are not the same size, and a little bit counterintuitively, the longer pin is the one that's forward hidden by something. So I'm going to put that one over here in my dish next to the takedown lever so I know which one it is. You can hammer out the back one too at the same time. Out it comes. All right. So your next step is going to be remove the locking block, because you'll need that to be out in order to remove the trigger. Just pull up on it a little bit with your pin punch, it'll come right out. Alright, now for the slightly more difficult part. We have to remove the sear cage with the trigger assembly still attached or not. It's your call. I find it's actually probably a little bit easier with the assembly still in one piece. Personal preference. If you come over here to the right side of the gun, there's a little bit of a hole here in the sear cage. You can actually put your punch into it, lift up a little bit, and the assembly will start to come up. And then from there, you can just use your fingers. You gotta come pretty much straight up because there's a couple of spots here, like over here on the left side. I don't know if you can see it here. There's like a little wedge or a little square piece that's going into a recess in the frame. So if you don't come straight up, that'll bind up a little bit. You also want to apply upward force on the trigger to get that moving. And there we go. I like to do this with the right side facing up because over here we got this little lever that likes to fall out. That is acting on the trigger bar when the gun is assembled. Alright, so now we got empty frame. Put that off to the side. Now we've got our trigger bar, and our sear cage. To remove the trigger bar, it's pretty straightforward. It might have already happened on you while you were taking it out of the frame. All you gotta do is just slip this little guy out of the spring, and it will come out through this gap in the front of the sear cage. Alright, from there you can just remove this spring. There's a little hook end that goes around this. Let's see if we can get in the light a little bit better. There's a little notch here with a little hole. That's where that goes in. And the circular end gets into the trigger bar. So now we have a sear cage that still has all the fun bits. Sear, disconnector, this little guy. If he comes out on you, he just goes in here with the flat end of this wedge up. You'll see it fits right in there. Trigger bar will come under that, like so. Alright, let's come over here to the tac trigger. Overwatch is shipping these with an NP3 coated trigger bar, so you're not going to have to do any sort of weird swaps on anything. So you'll just take this guy. It comes with 2 trigger springs. The green one is a slightly heavier one. I think they said it's about a 4.4 pound brake, good for defensive use. The red one, which I actually threw in my polymer PPQ, is a 3.8 pound brake. I'm actually using the Springco reduced power trigger spring, and that's giving me about a 3 pound brake. So I'm going to actually reinstall with this one. But as you can see, the springs are pretty much identical. You got a round end here, or a circular end here, and a hook end here. So to install the new trigger, we'll start by hooking the hook end of the spring around the notch, and then we're going to just slip our trigger bar into here, keeping care to put it under the lever, and then all you gotta do is just slip that little bad boy into the hole, and then you're going to want to apply a little bit of pressure back to it to keep it taut so it doesn't slip off on you. The important part here is when you're installing it back into the frame, to maintain that pressure, and the trigger kind of has to go in first, otherwise it's just not going to clear everything. But you get that kind of started, and then you just keep pressure on this guy, and then straight back down. That goes into place. Trigger's in place. You can make sure the trigger's in place. Just look down this hole, and you should be able to see pretty much straight through with maybe a little bit of, I don't know, an oval shape to it because there's not a pin in there, so it's going to be a little bit off center. But now we're in good shape. So my recommendation is that when you reinstall these pins, you go back to front. So we'll take our back pin. I'll just apply some force with your finger to the top of the sear cage so that it does not start to pop out as you hammer. So I'll just get this guy started with the non-marring end of this. Oops. And then This is way harder to do when you've got a hat camera hanging off of you. Get that guy nice and in there. Make sure she looks pretty even. I'll give it one more light tap. All right, now we're even. Okay, so next step is going to be throw the locking block back in. So locking block goes this way. So you've got the sort of diagonal edge facing backwards into the gun, because so if you take your slide, you can actually see where it's going to lock in into this wedge right here. So that has to be facing backwards. Also, you've got a little cutout here for the pin. The pinhole is behind here, so it's got to be facing that way. Just pop that in. Again, apply a little bit of light pressure to the top of it so it doesn't go flying when you get it started. Get it started there. And once it's in a decent amount, it's not going to come out on you. Again, we're just trying to get it to the point where we're even. All right. That pin's in. Next fun part is our slide stop. So 2 things you got to be aware of. Well, 3 things. Number 1 is you might have to play with the trigger a little bit to get that hole lined up so that this pin will go straight through. Because if not, if it's a little bit off center, it's going to bind up on you. Second thing is that the little post here on the inside of the left side slide stop has to go under this little hole in the spring here, that little bend right there, so that the spring applies downward force to it unless there is a follower pushing up on it. The third thing is you can't actually put this all the way in until you have the other side in there, because if you push it all the way in, you won't have enough room to get this little notch back into the frame. So kind of get the pins started up to about the point where the post is going to make contact with the spring. Take your right side. Now you're basically doing the opposite of how you moved it. You're going to come in from the top, push that in. There we go. And again, you'll want to just rotate up on it a little bit. Push this guy in and just get a little bit of like finger pressure on there. But once you do that, if you pull on this a little bit, you'll notice it's sticking. So now we're in good shape. Now I swap out my roll of tape for my regular bench block. And I want to make sure I have a good hard surface directly underneath the right side slide stop, because now we're going to take the non-marring side of our hammer and we're going to hammer on this guy. Look from the top. If there's minimal to no gap on each side of the slide stop, you've done a good job. Also look at the right side. This looks, I mean, it's not exactly flush, but it's pretty close to it. It's not designed to be all the way flush with the side. So there we go. Now all you gotta do is take your takedown lever, reinsert it, rotated to the same angle that you removed it at, which is actually a little bit further back than 90 degrees. It'll come through one side, come through the other side. Rotate freely, pop your slide back on. Congratulations, you got yourself a new trigger installed. I'm really liking this trigger so far. I actually pulled it out of the gun, reinstalled everything back to factory so I can make this video. Really nice, basically 90 degrees, almost no take up, short travel, good break, great reset, super smooth trigger bar. And with the Springco springs, I am like literally my first 5 pull average was 3.00 pounds. So super nice. Again, I'm going to be having another video on a complete detail takedown, including slide and lower assembly of the Q5 steel frame coming up shortly. Thanks for tuning in. Hope this was helpful.